your brain automatically jumps to making up a story about it. This can be helpful and also cause some problems. Do you wish you could just create content and talk about things on social media that came easily to you, that you didn't have to try so hard to position yourself? Do you wish you could talk about your business and yourself and the things that you're really good at without feeling like you're only talking about your offers all the time, and without feeling like you have to brag in order to share what you're good at? Do you wish that you could draw in your ideal clients and bond with them in a way that felt really natural? Today's video is going to be great for you if you are somebody who wants to build a business around yourself, because we are talking about how to use stories to build a competition-proof brand. I'm Annie Kipp. I'm a coach, a strategist, and a thought partner for high achievers and business leaders who want to position themselves with authority in their field and build a business around themselves. My favorite place to work is right at this intersection of personal and professional development, because I have seen that is where the biggest shifts and transformations happen. On this channel, we dive deep into building a brand and a business around the things that make you unique and special. And we also tackle the mindset issues that come along the way. Now, stories are super important in your business because they are the one thing that your competition doesn't have. They're based on your unique experiences. So they really are a very, very important market differentiator for you. We all know that people buy from people that they know, like, and trust, and stories are really essential in building up that know, like, and trust factor. So today I'm talking about how you can use your stories to build this competition-proof brand. I'm sharing 3 important things you need to know about crafting your stories and having them available to use in this way. And I want you to stick around for the last tip because it is really counterintuitive to what you've probably been told to do in your business and how you present yourself all these years. One thing we've talked a lot about on this channel is how our brains just want to make sense of things for us. And that's because our brains are wired for story. They actually have been through thousands of years finding meaning in story. You've probably seen this happen in your life. When you are dealing with a situation where you don't have all the information, your brain automatically jumps to making up a story about it. This can be helpful and also cause some problems in relationships if you are jumping to conclusions. But that's essentially what your brain is doing, is making up a story because it feels better when things make sense. And so your brain wants to set up something that puts it in a nice little container and tells you what's really going on. Our brains are attracted to and they like stories much better than they like isolated facts. It's much easier for us to remember a recipe that would be told in the form of a story. You're baking with your grandma and this is what happened, and we found the flour and then we put some sugar in and she has this special scoop that is a half cup but it looks like a ladybug. When we have details like that in a story, it is much easier for our brain to remember that story and what happened and the details of it, rather than if that recipe were recited to you ingredient by ingredient. It's very hard for our brains to hold on to that information unless it's put into this container of a story. Because it is less work for our brains to take this information in and also retain it and hold on to it, it is really important for you to be able to talk about yourself and your experience and your expertise in the form of a story. The transmission of information is more fluid, and it is also more memorable and also more pleasurable. People love to hear stories. People relate to stories. And one of the great things about our brains and stories is that when you're listening to someone else's story, your brain is going back into your catalog of information and trying to find things that connect and trying to find other things that you can relate to. So the act of sharing a story with your clients is a very bonding experience. It's bonding without even meaning to, because our brains are always trying to find a connection. You become more relatable. You become someone that they can understand. They can feel like they can see the world through your eyes when you tell stories. And this is really important for building your brand and your business around yourself. When you want to set it up so that it works for you, the way that you work, the kind of work that you do, your stories help reinforce that to your ideal clients by telling about who you are and why you're this way and what kinds of things are important to you. One of my stories is about being a babysitter at age 10 or 12 and having all these babysitting customers in my neighborhood, and the parents loved me and I was the fun babysitter. And I realized that instead of doing these babysitting jobs individually, I could actually create something where I could spend the same amount of time and make multiples of the money that I was making. I don't know, I think I was probably getting $2 an hour or something like that at the time. But I created something and I gave it a name. I called it Kids Camp. And I told all the parents to bring their kids on this one day, and we're going to play in this one family's backyard on their swing set. And I created this opportunity for them to have more fun, and they loved playing with all their friends. And also it worked better for me because I was able to spend 1 hour and get multiple $2 an hour from all these different families. So that has really informed who I am as an entrepreneur. I am a really big fan of creating a business that works for you, that leverages your time in the best way possible, and allows you to do the work in a way that doesn't exhaust you. The people who are attracted to that kind of thing are my ideal clients. And so sharing that story is a really important part of my business. One of the things that I know is really hard for people, and has been hard for me too, is having those stories on the tip of your tongue. So I created a freebie that you can download below. It's called the Story Vault Worksheets. And that leads me to the first tip on storytelling. Actually do some work ahead of time and think about what your stories are. Make a list. You can use these worksheets that I created. Make a list of what your stories are. Just think back and think about the things that have happened to you in your life. If you have a hard time with that, I have a list of questions in these worksheets that will help you actually spur your memory and your imagination. Questions like, when did you choose to do something different from everybody else? That might bring up a lot of stories for you, and it's a way of figuring out what makes you special and different. Other questions are, if your life were a book, what would the chapters be? What has been most difficult in your life? When were you given a special gift? These are things that can help you really think about what's been important in your life. And this is another caution, is don't feel like they have to all be big events or significant or traumatic or dramatic. Sometimes it's those little moments that actually are really impactful. At the time that I created Kids Camp, it wasn't a big deal. I just was like, oh, I'm going to do this thing. I didn't really plan it in a big way. I just sort of had an idea and I followed it. And looking back, that was pivotal. That was huge. It said so many things to me about who I am as a person and as an entrepreneur naturally. If I were to be thinking of the major events in my life, I would probably skip over that. So look for those places of things that you're proud of, things that tickle you in your life, things that really stuck with you. Those are the stories that you want to remember. So my recommendation is that you make a list. Make a list of the stories and just think about the general lesson that you learned and how it's currently impacting you. And then later, take your time and fill out this sheet. This sheet is going to take you through your situation, what you desired at the time, the challenges, the process you went through, the solution you found, and your takeaways. And it also gives you some places to record details, things that are really, really important. I remember when I did Kids Camp, one of my favorite outfits to wear that made me feel like a rock star when I was running Kids Camp was a red tank top and white shorts. It was the 1970s. Just this simple act of taking a few minutes to think about your stories or jotting them down as they occur to you is bringing the unconscious into your consciousness, and that will go miles to helping you be able to recall those stories and articulate them when you have the opportunity to share. Thinking ahead about your stories is also really important to make sure that the details you're including are really meaningful to the story. Sometimes I know that I can get off track sharing details that don't really matter, and it's important to, when you're telling stories for business, to make sure that the details you're including are details that matter to the story and that really are things that you want to be sharing. The second tip I have for you about sharing your stories is that you need to be specific. Specificity becomes more relatable. The more universal you try to make it, the more general things are, the less people are able to relate to it. You would think that it's the opposite, but it's not. So don't be afraid of sharing the details. Don't be afraid that someone might not know what a Piggly Wiggly is. That's a kind of convenience store. You can tell them it's a convenience store, but tell the name of the thing so that it gives some context, it gives some color to the story that you're telling. Instead of just saying convenience store, you say, we went to the Piggly Wiggly, you know, that's the little convenience store in our town. It gives a totally different picture of what's going on. When you describe these specifics in detail, or you give them the context of what the experience was, you want to make sure that it paints a picture for people. And that's how our brains retain information, is in pictures. In my story, I like to let you know that we were playing in someone's specific backyard on their swing set. So don't be afraid to go into detail that matters so that people can have that context. It's like giving them a view from inside of your brain, inside of your eyes, seeing that story in your head. Give them the details because they don't know what's in there. You need to describe it. Tell them what it tasted like, what it looked like, what the temperature was, how it affected you, what you heard at the time. Give them a full picture of your story, of the experience that you had, so that they have things that they can lock onto and relate to. And trust that their brain is going into their back catalog of information to find things that are relatable. Oh yeah, I played on a swing set when I was a kid. I know what a swing set is. And trust that our brains are always making sense of things, always connecting. And that's how we bond with people. That's how we start seeing the same things and finding this similarity and building relationships. Once you have done the work of thinking about your stories and filling in the detail, the next step on this, the next up level, would be to find your brand story. Brand stories are essential. We all know really famous people by their brand story. Warren Buffett started investing when he was 11 years old. Steve Jobs dropped out of college and worked on computers in a garage. Phil Knight built shoes with a waffle maker and sold them out of the back of his car. And the thing to notice about these brand stories of these famous people is that nobody has the same story. This is what makes them unique, and this is your brand differentiator as well. So as you start telling more stories, you may notice that you're telling the same story over and over again. That's a good clue that you are getting close to what your brand story is. And when you have a brand story that tells where you came from, what matters to you, how you came to be good at what you're doing, why you're passionate about it, and how you became who you are today, that's a super valuable asset in your business. So don't be afraid of repeating it over and over again. You have to use your stories if you want to create a competition-proof brand. Feel free to share this story about how you got here over and over again in any way that you are public facing, on LinkedIn, on social media, in interviews, on podcasts, in videos, so that people start associating you with it. I have one more really important tip for you, but before I share it, I want to hear from you. Are you a natural born storyteller, or do you feel like this is a skill that you're developing right now? If you are a really good storyteller, please share with everybody else the tips that you might have on developing your stories or delivering your stories. How can people get over feeling shy about sharing their stories? I would love to hear in the comments tips from anybody who is a great storyteller. And also, if you have any questions about this as a developing storyteller, feel free to pop those into the comments as well. Now on to the last tip, which I think is super important for becoming a really great storyteller. And that tip is it's counterintuitive, I know, to what we have been told about presenting ourselves as leaders and as business people. That tip is to not try to be perfect. Is that a relief to hear? It's a relief to me. If you're trying to be perfect, you're not relatable. Just give it up. Let it be what it is. Tell your story, think ahead about it, know what you're going to say, but then let it go. Be a person telling a story and let it just flow out of your mouth. It doesn't have to be perfectly polished. It doesn't have to be delivered in the same way every time. Just get the gist of what you're going to talk about and what matters to you about your story, and then share it. Embrace your own humanity in the way that you are telling your stories and the kinds of stories that you tell. You don't have to only tell stories about how great you are. You can tell stories about lessons you've learned, disappointments you've had, even embarrassing moments that are related to your business and lessons that you've learned. I saw this in action one time, and it was very effective. I was at a networking event, and the speaker was talking about speaking and engaging the audience. And he opened with a story of like, oh yeah, this morning I spilled my Dunkin' Donuts coffee, and it was a terrible moment. So let's get on to the speech. And it was really interesting. Later in the speech, he revealed that he had opened with this little story about spilling his Dunkin' Donuts coffee because it draws the audience in. It creates an instant connection. Everybody knows what it's like to have spilled your coffee. And the specificity of the Dunkin' Donuts coffee made it more believable and more relatable. I know it feels like there's a lot at stake when you're a leader. I know the temptation is to kind of button everything down and make sure that you're not looking vulnerable or not making mistakes and being sort of perfect. But I am here to tell you that you will be a better leader. People will want to connect with you more. People will follow you more happily when you are willing to share your real self, when you're willing to share stories that reveal embarrassment or mistakes you've made or times that you've regretted something. Allow people to learn from you by sharing who you really are. Yes, pick stories that you really want to share. Don't share things that are unrelated and just being vulnerable for no reason. But don't try to be perfect. Don't only share stories that make you look good. Be a leader who is a human, a relatable person, and you will have much more success with connecting. Remember that stories are here to connect us. Trust the brains of the people who are hearing your stories, that they're going to find a connection with you and resonate with the details of your story. That is how you use stories to build a competition-proof brand. If you want more information on telling stories and crafting good narratives, I have a couple books that I think are great. This one's called Wired for Story. It's by Lisa Crone, and the other one that I really love is Resonate by Nancy Doherty. This one is great. It goes over some really famous speeches and breaks down what worked about them and what doesn't work about them. So I would highly recommend those books. I will put links in the description box below so that you can get them and check them out if you want to. And be sure to download the Story Vault worksheets that I created for you. Let yourself have a nice afternoon with a cup of tea, writing down some memories and some stories, and then take your time writing out the details and thinking through what the struggle was, what your process is, how it's affected you today, so that when you need your stories, they'll be on the tip of your tongue. They'll be in the front of your consciousness. If you're ready to dive into more authority building and putting yourself out there and doing some coaching, feel free to apply to work with me. I work with clients one-on-one, and the application is on my website. There's no obligation to work together, but if I think that you might be a good client for me and the kind of coaching that I do and the place that you are in your business, I will respond with a link. I'll respond anyway, but I will send you a link if I think we're a good fit, and we can sit down and have a conversation where we talk about what that would look like and what next steps might be. All right. Thank you for watching this video. I'm Annie Kipp, and I will see you next time.